This podcast is all about giving back. No strings attached, no funny business, no get-rich-quick schemes, but simply to provide some of mine and our amazing co-hosts their wisdom, stories, and hopefully some valuable insights. Together we have the ability to grow, sustain, and provide a healthy work-life balance for all the cleaners and restorers. As this is totally free, please subscribe, write a review, and share this podcast today. Now onto the show. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. So great to be back. So this fortnight, we're heading back to the scenario of the two-story house that had a black water intrusion from the water from the toilet upstairs. So the past episodes we've talked about the administration side, the WHS, the claim itself, and on this podcast we'd like to talk about the actual actions of the technician or technicians going to site. So obviously we need to demonstrate competency in the candidate that we take the site, and some of the things they need to look at is obviously before entering site is the WHS component, but once they've entered through the door, the gathering of the information is very important. Now, in hindsight, if we could, we'd like everybody to be sort of trained up prior to going to these sites. Sometimes this is not possible. Sometimes you may have a second technician right along on training. They might be on a 3-month training program, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is that the company has. And this may be the first black water claim that they've come across. So some of the training that is available out there are some standards that we'd be looking for. Is the IICRC S500 standard for water damage restoration, or the Australian equivalent to that. You'd also have to look at the Australia, New Zealand, the 3733, the textile floor coverings, which goes into the cleaning and maintenance of the residential and commercial carpeting. You also have to look at the Environment Protection Authority, the EPA, and the local requirements for prescribed waste disposal. You'd obviously look at the personal and site security procedures and the requirements. So site access, how you're getting access to the site. Do you require security codes, keys, who's going to be on site, who's not going to be allowed on site, so access to the property. Is there an alarm that you need to activate or deactivate when entering the property? The maintenance of the property, and also the confidentiality of what's found or what's seen inside the property. And then obviously the personal risk, so the safety and risk of putting people in there for health effects, exposure to microbes, contamination in the water damage building products, and then it's also present in the water damage. Building systems considerations relevant to the water remediation will be the structural component, so the method of construction and the materials, the heating and cooling and ventilation, including the heating and ventilation air conditioning systems or the HVAC systems, potential locations of not readily available water damaged, so behind and underneath plasterboard walls, ceilings, pipes, appliances, insulation, panel wallpaper, flooring, carpet, cabinetry, in situ spaces, so spaces that may not be quite visible at first attendance. The effects of the humidity, the airflow, the temperature on drying, and also moisture movement throughout the structure of the material and the contents. You'll be looking for those as well. So types of hazards and risks and ways to control, you'd have to have a look at through the Safe Work Australia regulations and guidelines, which we did go over in the past podcasts. So look at your JSAs, your SWIMs, your SWM statements, so job safety analysis, safe work method statements. Also have a look at your manufacturer's instructions and safety data sheets. So if you're applying chemicals, you'll be looking at those as well. Types of protective equipment, and also the correct selection, the care and the use of that PPE, and then the disposal afterwards as well, knowing that you've gone into a contaminated property. You also be looking at your slips, trips, falls, and spills. So you'd be looking at what sort of footwear you do have on, if you're having coveralls on, gloves, all those sorts of things, where you're walking. Obviously, if there's areas that you can't actually visibly see the floor, you're not sure of what's under it. So you want to be careful around that as well. And then going from wet to dry areas as well. Yeah, you'd have to have a look at your manual handling techniques. So if you're moving or pushing or pulling furniture out the way, cabinets, that sort of thing. Yeah, maybe have to have a look at, probably not on this site, but still doesn't really matter the age of the property, but maybe have a look at the asbestos, if there's any asbestos sheeting, any evidence of that, or you might have to do some testing prior to any demolition. But if obviously ceilings have fallen or whatever, you might have to have that inspected if you're somewhat inclined to, if you're not sure. You might have to use some use of signages, barriers, containment, and engineering controls. Other than PPE, it might be air filtration systems, AFDs, opening windows, ventilation, getting that dead air space out. So you might have to what they call burp the environment, open the windows up and push air out, cycle clean air in. In cabinets underneath stairs, on this case, uh, good reason to really get some airflow in there and get it out. But just be mindful, because if there is contamination in the air, which is most likely, where that's going, what you're recontaminating or contaminating that wasn't contaminated before. So just be mindful of that as well. So you might have to do some push pulling there or just see what's going on. You'll have to have a look at your cleaning principles. So with this type of claim, um, there's a couple ways you can look at it. So we'll go into those. There's a way we can go and control the air environment before we do anything, before we put any push pull methods in. Try and hold that contaminants into areas, containment. But the biggest thing is you want to extract, or you want to remove the bulk before you do any sort of other cleaning at all. That's the main thing, is remove the bulk, then disinfect. So you'll be having a look at your cleaning agents, how they work. So manufacturers, chemicals don't work instantly. They do take time to work. So working out the best chemicals for the situation, how long that chemical is going to require to actually work, how long does it work for? So once it's touched those surfaces of gross contamination, how long do those chemicals actually last for? Look at the pH pair of your chemicals, the sequence and the direction of how you're removing. So are you starting from the furthest point or the closest point? If you're starting from the furthest point, where's it going? If you're starting from the nearest point, are you then re-spreading over and causing more work for yourself? And then you'll also be looking at the results that you're wanting to achieve as well. This is a black water. We've let you know that in the description. So once you're comfortable that you've removed the black water and the contamination around that, does it then go to grey water, then clean water? So we'll discuss some of those properties as well. And then we're looking at some of the intrusion of the mitigation and the materials. So those surface types themselves, the porous, the semi-porous, and the non-porous areas, and you're determining the exposure limit to those, and then what's required from that as well. So how long it's been wet for, the duration of that, the material composition, the cost of restoration, the cost of replacement, sentimental, legal, artistic, cultural, historic value, potential secondary harm and waste created from the restoration methods as well. So we'll look at those as well. Situations and procedures for seeking specialist advice. So when working, required insurance company approval. You're not just to go in there and smash and grab. Dispose of at your own will. You need to obviously understand how this insurance claim is going to be covered. Is there situations where you maybe require a waiver? Is there specialized content such as artwork that may need specialized additional work to be done? Is there high value in irreplaceable items as well?
Then have a look at your strengths and limitations that you actually provide as a service. So you may have to go outside what it is that your company or what you'd like to have control of. So, for instance, if you need an indoor environmental professional or an IEP, an occupational hygienist, someone to do some pre and post sampling for you, look at that side of things as well. You might need a building professional to have a look at some of the actual structure. If you need to remove walls, etc., are they load bearing? What can you do professionally yourself, or what do you need to bring people in for? Most likely, you're going to probably need an insurance representative for this type of claim, and maybe even a microbiologist to have a look at what actually contaminations are, whether airborne or you've passed maybe during at the end of or before you put your drying equipment in to make sure that you actually have decontaminated the areas correctly. Sometimes a second pair of eyes outside your business works wonders on these types of claims. It just takes some of that liability away from you, the owner, and you, the contractor. And then you should look at where it's actually gone. So, is it part of the claim? Is it when you're doing your demarcation areas? You're looking at obviously how long it's wet for. So, if it's still wet, sopping wet, uh, good indications that wet to dry, obviously. So, but you've also got humidic or static pressure in the air that actually can travel. Make the contamination travel. So, if someone's walked into the place after this and they've opened the fridge, we've seen bacteria levels in the fridge with E. coli in them. So, you're going to think of those things as well. People can open up cupboards, and therefore it changes that airflow in the property, and therefore now we've got E. coli in those cupboards as well. So you have to look at those things. But again, if you're not too sure about those, that's where you'd sort of have a chat with your IEP and also your insurance representative to clarify what is covered, what may not be covered, and what procedures should take place there. Obviously, with the flooring on this one, so any carpeted sections to be disposed, the cost of repair is far outweighs the cost of replacement. So the simple equation on this one is to lift and remove. But once you've lifted carpet underlay, making sure that you've taken out the smooth edge as well. You're probably going to be taking out skirtings, wall linings. You have to be cleaning underneath base plates, uh, framing, whatever subfloor there is. There may be wall linings behind that, insulation. There's plenty of things you may be having to look out for. And you want to take evidence of everything that you dispose of. So, find out what type of carpet it is. Do a burn test if you have to. Take good photos of the front and also the back. Take good photos of the underlay, the smooth edge. Is it two pin, two row underlay? Or is it architectural underlay, three rows of pins? Is there metal capping? All those sorts of things. So make sure you do very good investigative work. So later on the track, when they need to replace it, it's a like for like situation. So that's all your furnitures as well. If there's tags on them, make sure you take good photos of the tags. Try and identify the fibers, to identify where they may have been bought from, rugs, etc. So all that sort of stuff. So make sure we do very good manifest lists on those. In this type of claim, you're going to have to look at what type of machinery, tools, uh, chemicals that you'll be taking to site. So it's good to have, if you are doing this type of work, it's actually good to have a plan of action prior to doing this type of work. So in our business, we have a dedicated truck mounted on a trailer unit that goes to all our crime scene, Blackwater, um, grow up, clandestine, all those sorts of claims. So that machine is solely for that purpose. Um, there's a procedure on how to start that machine, how to close that machine down, how to check that machine, how to do maintenance on that machine, and the same with all the hoses and the wands and tools that go along with that in that trailer. They are separate to everything else in our facility. So they're decontaminated after every use and stored in that container as a whole. And then we have also um, storage buckets for those types of claims as well. So something you may think about, big storage buckets with all your PPE in it, just you pick up. We also have one that sits outside the property. So if we're working inside the property, they have the signs that we put up outside the property. It's also got spare PPE, so mask, gloves, booties, also overalls. For the instant that if somebody that you invited to site doesn't have that PPE, it's available for them to put on outside rather than come through and try and find you. So part of our records when coming to site is that you do a sign-in. So there's a signing book there, and in that signing book it tells them what's in the bucket and what they require to walk on site while we're on site. So they'll be looking at your mask, what type of mask. We have some disposable masks that they can keep with the proper charcoal filters in them. They're fairly cheap. So again, we just build them out per item for that job. We prefer people to wear the correct PPE and not worry about the price of things and come on site and, you know, expose themselves to things they shouldn't be exposed to. So little things like that. You need to have your business set up to do this type of work. It's not something that you just race in to do. There is a lot of risk involved with the personnel going to site, and also if they're trailing that back, putting it in their vehicles and taking it to other sites, back to the office, back to the house with their families. Someone with an immune deficiency just can't be around E. coli, and it's not good for anybody. But someone with immune deficiency, it can affect very rapidly, and it's something we want to try to avoid. So part of what we're doing is to make sure that everybody is trained up professionally. We have the correct and available tools, machinery, chemicals, PPE, everything is available for these type of claims. Um, I'm not sure how your business is, but our business probably does a couple of these a week on average. So we can pretty much train people up pretty easily. Sometimes when you're doing this, you may be a sole, or you might have just employed your first person, and you're thinking, this is a lot to do. I could just send another job, and I might have to get called out to this sort of job. But these are very specialised jobs. So if you are going to take these jobs on, just be aware of the risks that are involved. And I would recommend highly, if you're not set up to do these jobs correctly, that you do reach out or network to somebody that you trust and maybe partner up with them or get some training from them. But don't take these claims lightly. So you'll be looking at some of the materials now, depending on the claim. So this claim's not too bad. It's just a toilet overflow. You probably won't need submersible pumps on this one, but there are occasions where you will need submersible pumps. Plenty we do is in commercial properties or residential high rises where they have elevators, so elevator shafts. You require submersible pumps for those. You don't use your um, extraction machines that you use for every day on those types, because there is oil and contaminants in there. So you don't want that running to your machine. You just can't get it out of your machine, your waste tank and stuff. So you will need submersible pumps. But again, for a normal house, you may not need that. That's not always necessary. So you will need some sort of extraction machine. You will need to extract, whether it's dry or not, you still need to pressure wash these areas down, and you still need to extract and remove that water and dispose of it correctly. So you will need some sort of extraction machine, whether it's a portable truck mount or wetback machine. That's completely up to you. Obviously, the bigger the machine, the more volume and the speed that you can do those sort of claims in. So if you're doing a few of them, it's sometimes maybe a good investment to spend $20,000 on a second-hand machine set up in a trailer, and it just sits there and it'll make itself out off pretty quickly. Having a look at the tools you'll be using as well. So your wands, your weighted dragger tools, your stationary tools, hand tools, self-propelled units, whatever it may be. Just remind yourself that there is contaminated waste. Visually look at that as chunkies in the water. Even though you may not see that, that's what you have to visualize. And would you want to take that to the next place? So if you are using your machinery that is used for normal domestic or commercial work, and you are using it for this type of work, decontamination is vital. It's vital anyway, but it's more vital if you don't have separate machinery just to do this type of work. So make sure you do invest in time and money and energy and training in doing that. You were looking at some of the drying equipment, so your actual centrifugal air movement equipment. So whatever you're using, there's different types in the market. I'm not going to tell you which type to use. It's completely up to you. You'll also be looking at maybe some structural cavity drying, so some tubing or ducting or something along those lines to get to areas that may have some secondary damage that needs to be or may need to stay on site in situ. You'll be looking at some air filtration devices, some AFDs, HEPA filters, you might know them, air scrubbers. So you'll be looking at scrubbing the air, filtration in the air, dehumidification, whether they're refrigerant or desiccants or some sort of heating fan machine. So you're putting heat across the surface, getting air movement is the main thing there. And then you also maybe even some radiant heat as well. So if we're looking at bathrooms, you may need radiant heat to actually dry through the tiles and grout, and also the sand that actually is underneath all that, which is sort of a leveling layer. So again, this is something you need to talk to with your um, insurance agent, builder, IEP, those sorts of things on what's going on there, whether that's been ripped out or not, or if you're going to try and save that. Again, that will come down to their policy on that one. We're also looking at how you're going to monitor all this, so detecting and monitoring. So, you're looking at your thermometers, hydrometers, psychometers, mammeters, gas detectors, particle counters, moisture meters, thermal image cameras, your charts, your psychometric charts and calculators, the data loggers, um, remote monitoring systems, ATP, and then ATP coli sampling as well. You also be having to look at the limitations of these devices. So being able to use these devices correctly and also understanding how to use them correctly and the limitations that each of those devices have. Now, taking samples of the air and swab testing may run you up thousands of dollars. So that's something you need to discuss with the insurance company, is to obviously have that as an expense to the job. So whether you're going to pay for that or that's going to get charged to the insurance company by one of those third-party suppliers, an IEP or something along those lines. The builder might take that over and do that for you. So you might just have to do the cleanup or the restoration side of things. Also have a look at different your meters that you got may not be prevalent for the materials that you're checking. So if you're using a wood moisture meter and you've got concrete, is that relevant? Is it relevant to taking air samples, relative humidity samples, things like that? So just ensure that you are using the detection monitors and instruments as designed, as manufacturer designed. When you're talking about cleaning agents, you need to understand their purpose, their actions and correct use, their precautions, safe handling, storage, and disposal. So you'll be looking at your antimicrobial agents, detergents, and disinfectants. You may be looking at green products or not. You may be looking at chlorine dioxide products, hydrogen peroxide, alcohol base, whatever it is that your company is using, as long as you follow the procedures and it's used correctly for the application. As long as the result at the end is a clearance, that's what we're after. So one chemical may not suit another person, I know I'm very susceptible to some chemicals. I can't use them. My allergens flare up. So just be wary that if you're not using the correct PPE, you're using some of these chemicals, that they can cause reactions to yourself, your skin, absorption as well. So just make sure you're covered up correctly for use, and make sure you're using the chemicals correctly as prescribed by the manufacturer. We also want to have a look at the sustainable work practices and compliances with environmental regulations. So we need to minimize any negative environmental impact. So we're not dumping this out into the drain waters. We're not taking the sewage water and putting it down the driveway, which goes into the drain system. We're not splashing this chemical all around outside or whatever. We're conserving energy and water when possible. So, we're not just going there with a hose. We can use a pressure washer, so we can serve some pressure, some water there. Better result. If we're recycling, a big portion of what we do is disposal. We need to look at maybe how we can recycle some of those products. Is it beneficial to recycle, some metals or some copper lines, or how you're breaking this down? So you did throwing a full sofa out, or you're breaking it down and pulling it apart to lessen the impact of the environment as it goes into disposal. So have a look at your disposal measures as well. If you're working with asbestos, that can't go to your normal refuge. There has to be specialised people come in. That needs to be wrapped a certain way. It also needs to be disposed and also transported a certain way as well. So things you need to know of. All right, so that is the outline of the discussion of this scenario. So on the next episode, we will be discussing sending a technician in and going through this claim. So it's going to be a pretty full-on discussion, and some people may look at it and say, "We do this a different way. This is not the way we do it. That's not the way it should be done." Again, this is a general purpose discussion to allow people to have an understanding of what to be looking for. It's not a play-by-play model. Again, each claim is going to be different. Not if you have two of these houses side by side, the two claims will be done completely different. There's many contributing factors that will design that. The education of the technician going in, the what's being allowed by the clients, maybe the health of the clients, their policies, timeframes. If the people have pets or no pets, how the property is, it what state is the property in, is there disrepair, is there previous damage, all those sorts of things take into account. We can't take into account every situation, so it's going to be a broad look at the a claim, as easy as we can make it, covering what we just discussed. So if you are doing these types of claims, what I'd like you to take out of this is just don't rush into these type of claims. Yes, you do make a lot more money doing these types of claims because they're not a simple procedure claim. With a clean water break, you're just going in there and it's a clean water break. This type of claim, it's category 3 or black water, so it's grossly contaminated. In this case, it's probably a class 4, so they specialise drying because we've got ceilings, we've got wall linings, we've got cabinetry, we've got large areas that have been affected, we've got areas that maybe you can't see that have been affected. Maybe they've opened up cupboards in other areas of the house that they've been away for a couple of days, so they've walked home, they've walked into it, so obviously they've gone in and walked and opened up a few doors, so we've got air movement. So the idea would be a run through of the job itself, some best practices that I can put forward with my 20 years plus experience in the industry, but as an overall look at this type of claim. These are not unique by any stretch of imagination, but a smaller company that's just getting into or may not have seen this, or maybe looking at maybe getting into this and seeing what is it that I need to do. So the idea behind this is to get people to understand that it's not a clean water, it is a black water break. There is a lot of circumstances around that you need to look at. Training is huge on these types of claims: who enters a site, the safety precautions, disposal, the whole gamut of what's included in this. So on the next episode, we will be discussing a technician's bird's eye view of this, and maybe we'll do it as a third party as well, where I've come into this job and this is what I'm looking at as a professional with experience, and maybe also what a new technician that hasn't got this type of experience may be going through as well. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode. It should be a great one, and I hope everyone's really enjoying what we're doing here. So thank you very much, and see you on the next episode.
By assessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. The Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use this podcast or the information presented in this podcast.